to give our Sunday service, which is Mission Impossible Code. Please welcome.
Sounds very optimistic. I see Halbert chuckling over there. The reference is to a movie. For those that don't know, maybe it's before their time.
You could play the song just that everyone knows. You could play
Yeah. So, but in the movie, they actually accomplished the Mission Impossible. So I wanted to start it today. First of all, it's always very nice to see everyone. But I really wanted to actually thank Colin for his service last week. I'm always grateful for anyone who kind of gives the service and how we kind of share the responsibility. He was scheduled to give it anyway, but I was just kind of grateful that he was giving it because I had just gotten back from the States and I kind of felt like I needed kind of another week to kind of settle and get adjusted. So I was grateful for that reason, but for anyone who's kind of prepared service, you know that it's, you really want to try to inspire people, but it's kind of a tough crowd, right? It's a rough crowd. You don't want to say, you want to try to say something unique or something new or something that people haven't heard before, at least express what they've heard before in a way that gives them a different way to think of it, right? So I think oftentimes the goal, at least for me, is if at least one person, right? If at least one person can kind of really feel inspired or relate to the message, then that's a success, right? Obviously you want everyone to take something from it, but it's kind of this hard that if one person could really understand what I'm trying to share, right? So I feel like last week, Colin at least had one person that somehow I felt really connected to what he was saying, and I really felt one part of his service especially kind of really resonated with me and kind of inspired today's theme. So Colin got at least one person last week. So I just wanted to share that because it's always quite it's quite a challenge to give a service in one aspect. And you walked in right after. I've just been thanking you for last week's service. So, the part that kind of really resonated with me was when Colin was sharing about taking on a mission that was kind of a challenge, but you really had this heart to take on responsibility and try to make something with UPF, and then kind of seeing kind of a positive side effect of that, right? And of course, there's kind of spiritual conditions and spiritual influences, but I also think there's something external in that there might be a boost of confidence, or there's some by living for something higher than our own purpose, we kind of gain different aspects, right? Both spiritual and external. But it really inspired me to talk about mission today, and I think it's an important topic because I think very often we kind of have a reaction to the idea of mission, or we have, everyone will have a different view of what does it mean to have a mission or take on a mission. So I just kind of wanted to share some thoughts around it because I really think that for us, mission is very crucial in our life of faith, and it really kind of defines our purpose, right? And it's kind of, the idea of mission is kind of closely tied with the idea of purpose. So to start off, one of the things about this idea of mission is when I was preparing for the service and reflecting on this, it right away brought me back to a kind of argument or discussion we used to have in the dormitory in Korea. And I don't know if it's something that was kind of a common discussion among all second gen. I don't know if it's something that got brought in to the dormitory, or if it's something we kind of came up with ourselves. But there was this discussion about whether mission was something that we should commit to, even if it meant kind of sacrificing parts of our family life, or if we should, maybe do STF or something as a way to prepare for the blessing. But then once we were blessed, we should just focus on creating a kind of ideal family, right? And there was this kind of debate about, what's the priority, and of course we were teenagers, so we're talking about like 13 to 17, so we had no idea what we were talking about, but we just like to talk about it theoretically, right? as you do when you're a teenager. But the idea was, just to give the context, is we had a lot of people in the dorm whose parents were kind of full-time missionaries or leaders. They were the children of leaders, and it really affected them, right? Especially the brothers and sisters who were older than me, because they were kind of the pre-1982 blessing. And there was always this concept of like, I don't have a good relationship with my parents, and sometimes I'm a bit resentful. And again, these were second gen who were living in the dorms, so who were still very positive about the movement. They had a pretty strong life of faith, and they still felt quite resentful, to parents for not being around, right? And especially it would usually be one parent, usually the father, who would be away. And for an example, in an extreme case, the father would come home for a week, twice a year, right? And so, it was obvious, that felt very wrong, right? It felt like, that was maybe too extreme or too mission focused, and it obviously had kind of an effect on the family, right? But then the other idea was, well, if you're just focused on your family life, if you're just focused on your couple and your family and kind of building a family, then how does kind of the providence move forward? Right? How is I'm rereading the New Testament, and one of the first things you get to is the Beatitudes, right? And that's where Jesus says, don't just love your neighbors, don't just love your family, but love your enemy. Because if you just love your own family, how are you different than everyone else, right? What makes you special? And everyone loves their own family. Everyone loves their own friends and the people they're closest to. So it was this kind of question: is can you be too family focused? Can you be too mission focused? And it was really like the way the discussion was framed was kind of like choose one or the other, right? Do you want to be more family or do you want to be more mission, right? And part of the idea was, because we're very idealistic in that, is we should be more mission because that's the higher purpose, right? And it's the idea that you sacrifice yourself for your family, but you sacrifice your family for the nation, you sacrifice the nation for the world, this kind of concept. But for me, very clearly in that discussion, I felt like it was the wrong argument. Even then, I really felt strongly that it has to be both. They're interconnected. They're the same thing in a way. And that was kind of always the stance I took. That mission and family were always dependent on each other. And that's kind of the stance I took in those discussions was, if you have your family life with no mission, then it'll hurt your family life in terms of your ability to have your family have purpose and direction. And if you sacrifice your family for mission, the mission would ultimately fail, right? And now that I got older, I realized that those extreme examples of leaders who only came home 2 weeks in the year, they were using mission as an excuse. That's my own very judgmental viewpoint, but they were using mission as an excuse not to kind of face the challenges in the family life. And so I think that when I was young, that really shaped my view on mission, right? Like the blessing is a mission, but then also you need a mission for the family to kind of work together and be supportive of. And I know that I was very influenced by that from my own parents, because my mom and dad were always together. They were always working together. They started a business together. They were always doing things together, and they always kept the family close by. But my dad was both my parents actually were very focused on mission. They tried to teach Sunday school. They went to church every week. They really tried to volunteer and help other members. But also, my dad at one point was really trying to get back to hometown, right? And really had this. He was really inspired by the idea of restoring the hometown. And he had a family meeting once where he drew like a savings chart, like we need to save this much so that we can move, right? And he was trying to fill it in. And I think that's part of the reason why when the National Messiah Mission came, he wanted to take it. He saw that as like a way to kind of fulfill the hometown mission at a higher level, right? So I guess I always felt that. I think the other thing that really affected me is when I looked at true parents, right? So you have these examples of leaders who would never be home. But when I looked at true parents, I was like, well, actually, when I see true parents, they're always together, right? They're not always with their children, but mother and father were always together. They always did everything as a couple. And, you know, when father's traveling the world, mother's traveling the world with him. And even if they didn't travel together, they would call each other every night, right? And sing to each other. And I just remember once, I guess I was in I have no idea where I saw this, but one leader presented a video of father on a fishing boat, Skyping with mother, who was, I think, doing one of the world tours at the time, right? And then they were kind of singing to each other, and it was just a beautiful image. And I just remember feeling very much like, you know, that's they're both focused on mission, but they're also focused on doing mission as a couple, right? Like they're focused on their relationship as a couple, not being disconnected from the mission. So, you know, and the last example I want to give is this idea of being too mission focused or too family focused, right? Is I really felt on STF this like insular kind of family focus, because one of the things that just really bothered me is when I would like knock on the door, it'd be like 5 or 6 p.m. and the person would open the door and they're like, "We're having dinner," right? As if like that was the most important thing in the world, was to have dinner. And I know part of that is because in my family we didn't have like a scheduled dinner. We just kind of ate whenever, and mom was always desperately trying to get us to like sit down together. She'd make a nice big meal, and then like Jean would come and like eat half of it, you know. And so it's just, I know part of it is my own family culture, but part of it just really bugged me as being like, that's the most important thing in your life, is your family dinner. Like that just struck me as so wrong. It's just so like, I eat too, right? It's not like when you eat the world stops, or that, you know. So anyway, I just feel like that's kind of the extreme version of, you know, being kind of creating a bubble or being very insulated or isolated. So I think it's just an important question in our life of faith. What is our mission, right? What is our direction and our purpose outside of the word we usually use, which is responsibility, right? Because I think mission can be a loaded term. I think there's a bit of a negative connotation, or we have this interpretation of the word meaning like something that is an appointed position or something that's given to us or assigned to us. It's like, in a way, being told what to do. And, you know, I think the word mission kind of encapsulates a lot of different things. I think one of the key parts of mission is the idea of our responsibility, as kind of in the principle. And I think that responsibility kind of gives us purpose, and it gives us value. But I think the word mission is still very different from the word responsibility, because I think the word responsibility is more broad, right? You have a responsibility to develop your life of faith, develop your character, to make a connection with God and to understand God more deeply, in a way that's kind of very much like a first blessing responsibility, or first blessing mission, right? And then you have a responsibility to take care of your family and to understand your spouse and to raise your kids and take care of your kids, and that's like a second blessing mission, right? But at the same time, you know, I think there is this, you know, this higher level than mission, this third blessing mission, and I think we are all trying to build a better world, right? We want there to be a better world. We're trying to build a better world. We're trying to build Chanukuk. And so I think this is the idea of like a third blessing mission, right? And the way I would define this type of mission is, you know, anything that you're doing that is not, that you're not benefiting from directly. You know, this idea of kind of an unselfish, the things you do in your life that are not in any way selfish, right? They don't directly help you in the sense that, you know, it's not directly contributing to your family or to your own life. And like in Colum's example, I think there can be, you know, when you serve God's will and when you invest for the higher purpose, anyway, there's blessings that come back to you. But that's not the intent. That's not the purpose of the action. So I think mission can be defined in many different ways, and I think there's a lot of things people can do that becomes their mission. But I think that it's, in our movement, without any titles, without any kind of responsibility assigned to us, there's still this kind of mission that True Parents have established, led by example, of tribal messiahship, right? And this idea of we're trying to, if we want to build Chernobyl, if we want to make the world a better place, we at least have to be able to take care of a kind of small neighborhood, or at least a certain amount of people, right? And of course I'm thinking about this a lot because Mother's really trying to, encourage people to take on tribal messiahship, encourage people to, build their own tribe or take care of their own tribe. And thinking about that, Mother's mission is really, and she says this a lot as well, is to try to take care of all people, right? We're talking about her tribal Messiah area is kind of 7.5 billion, right? It's incredibly difficult, if not impossible mission, right? And part of the reason for the title is that Mother's looking at 7.5 billion people and trying to figure out how do we affect them all? How do we improve the lives of everyone? And the only answer is you have to segment into smaller parts. You have to take on smaller little areas that you can focus on. So the idea of kind of focusing on a small area of 430 people, the way Father used to describe home church, 360 homes, it's very much the only way that we can actually really be able to change society, is if we can change it kind of step by step. And it just reminded me, I was reading, I think it was a video actually, it was about how to build a business. And I just thought it was an excellent comparison because the person starts by explaining, if you want to build a business, if you want to build kind of a customer base, or you want to build a following, if you're trying to get people to support what you're doing, you need a core 100, right? And this is how they refer to it. You need 100 people who like what you're doing and are willing to support you, right? Now he was talking specifically about kind of if you're trying to make a website or a blog or kind of a YouTube channel, or he's saying if you have 100 people that you can find that support what you're doing, that believe in you, that are inspired by you, then that's all you really need, right? It doesn't matter how many people are watching you or how famous you are, how much impact you're having. You just need to find 100 people first, and then then you'll grow it exponentially, right? Then the knock-on effect will be quick and rapid. So I think it's the same principle, right? You need to start small. You need to be able to focus on one area, and then the knock-on effect will happen. Now, for me, that's very hard to see at the level of 430, right? And again, I've explained this a couple times. So, for me, the Tribal Messiah mission is I have to do what I can do, right? And then see what I can build. So that's why the idea of having an event, just starting with 4 or 5 couples, if they will come, and even if no one comes to that kind of event, that's all I can do. So I'll keep having the event, and the rest is kind of up to God and up to Spirit will. Now that's a little bit of getting a little bit sidetracked because I wanted to talk about tribal messiahship, but I think that's also, again, a type of mission that is, kind of assigned or kind of directed, or it's kind of coming from the church and coming from True Parents. So it's still kind of an individual challenge for everyone to decide. But I still think that the concept of mission, is still very much tied to purpose. I think in our modern society, purpose is an incredibly important issue because people have lost purpose in general. And this idea of mission is not just connected to the church. I think it's in everyone's life. There is kind of a mission people try to take on, a purpose that they try to go for. And I feel like our modern society has really become very self-absorbed, right? There's very little focus on living for a higher purpose, living for the sake of the world. The day-to-day of most people's life is self-absorbed. It's about kind of how they're surviving, how they're getting through the day, how they're handling the stress in their own lives, their own interpersonal relationships, without a focus on the rest of the world or knowledge of the rest of the world. And in a way that's natural, like that's to be expected, but I think ultimately then it makes people adrift, right? There's kind of a lack of purpose. And I wanted to mention this just because it's been in the news a lot, but there's this discussion around billionaires in American politics. Should billionaires even exist, right? And I find it fascinating because I tend to side with the idea that billionaires shouldn't exist, right? Like what is your view of the world that you hold on to $1 billion, right? Like that you're buying certain things that are purely kind of for yourself in your own network rather than actually working on some of the problems that exist. So, for example, you have a billionaire like the Gates, right? Bill and Melinda Gates, founder of Microsoft, and basically half of their wealth goes into their charity work, and their charity work is quite amazing. It's actually, they give a report every year, and it really is kind of trying to address and analyze the actual suffering in the world, right? And it's about getting vaccines to poor areas of the world. It's about trying to change the education systems to help, lower the rates of disease. I mean, the Gates really have a mission, and you can see it. You can see it in how they kind of present themselves. You see it in how they use their money. And so it's just, I find this just kind of a fascinating kind of discussion that's kind of happening, but I think it's very related to this point, where people are acquiring wealth, they're getting very wealthy, and they don't really have a purpose, a direction. So then the money just kind of stays with them, right? There's not an understanding of this greater purpose or this greater good. I think, to conclude, I think mission can seem hard, right? And I think this is always kind of the thing with responsibility and the thing with, serving the greater good. It looks hard. But I think it's actually, in many ways, harder not to take on responsibility. I think the principle explains this very well by saying that there's no freedom outside of responsibility. And that concept is something that really kind of has always motivated and always moved me, right? Like it's worth getting more responsibility. It's worth serving a higher purpose because it benefits us more than it hurts us, right? So with all that being said, I wanted to just, in that context, I wanted to just share a little personally. And for those of you who don't know, me and Vicky mentioned, I think in December, that we wanted to see if it was possible to kind of step back from the national leader position. And I kind of wanted to explain that in the context of just saying how great mission is that always, I've said this many times, but I really believe that balance is an important part of, fulfilling our responsibility and fulfilling our mission. So I feel like the balance right now is going a little too much towards mission and away from family. And it's this idea of, being able to combine the two and being able to do them in a way that you're successful on both fronts. And I also just think personally, for us, it kind of hit us at a bad time in terms of kind of we're a young family and we're living way outside of the city, as well as kind of some personal things that have happened. And I also think, actually, one of the main reasons, though, is I think as a community we need more resources. And part of the reason is, I guess the main point is I don't want to change my mission focus. I don't want to stop serving the Irish providence or God's providence, but I feel like there's someone out there who can do it better than I am. And that's kind of what I want to explore and want to try to see, is if we can get kind of new blood in or other resources in to make the mission more effective, right? And if not, then I'll keep doing it, right? And I just I wanted to explain that because we're going to be talking about it in the meeting today, and because I kind of felt really inspired to talk about mission, I kind of want to connect those two things in the Sunday service, right? Because for me, I feel like without mission, life becomes very much secular. The default is to drift into a very kind of materialistic, living every day type of life. And sometimes I see myself drifting that way, and I really don't like it. And it actually scares me, and it makes me want to double down on the mission aspect. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not doing the mission as well as I'd like to, as well as I think I should, and as well as I think someone else could. So I'm just trying to balance those things, and I just want to kind of try to share that very openly as well. So that's the thing is, though, for me, mission always has to be a part of my life. Right? And I think it's an important question in everyone's life. What is our mission? And it doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to the church. I think there's a lot of missions that are, when people work for charity, when people are actually trying to impact the world. And again, my earlier definition of mission, when you're trying to impact the world or invest your time and energy and money in the world in an area that's not directly benefiting, I feel like is really mission. It's really the example of living for the higher purpose. And I think there's a lot of people that do that very well, and that are very inspiring people and very great examples of that heart. So it's something I just ask. I think in conclusion, I think it's something that's important we ask ourselves, that we reflect on. What is our mission? How are we accomplishing our mission? And I think that's a very personal answer. I think, as many things in life, it's not something other people can tell you. But I wanted to share a little of my own struggles with it and my own thoughts on it, and just kind of, I think it's a good time to kind of discuss that in more details. So that's my conclusion, right? So I just want to say that, it's the balance of life and mission that I think is really how we find purpose and ultimately value and happiness. And I think it's something all of us are doing, actually. I think all of us have that heart to do it. And so I think it's important to kind of keep asking that question, is how well are we balancing those two things. So if everyone could join me in prayer. Thank you for your time. Sarai Manashin, Hanul, good morning. Dear beloved and precious Heavenly Parent, I thank you for today and this time together as a wider community and extended family. Heavenly Parent, every time we come here with a heart to really understand your love for us more deeply. We come here trying to open up our hearts and minds to become better people, people who can align our lives and our efforts with your will, with your providence, with your heart. We know always that we're very lucky people in this world for many different reasons. To live in kind of a time in history and a part of the world where we're very free to live our lives, to kind of build our families without threat of war or threat of incredible disaster or high rates of death. But we also know we've met true parents, we've learned the principle, we have some guidelines and direction in our lives of faith. So in many ways we're very, very blessed, and we've really been given so much. So I pray always we can go forward with a heart of gratitude, that we can always have an idea of the bigger picture, understand that other people are not as fortunate, that other people really do live unhappy and confusing lives. and that we can always have, from our heart of gratitude, a heart to somehow pay back, that to really share the blessings we've received, the knowledge that we have, the love that we've been given. That desire can really give us opportunities, can really help enrich the lives of other people, and also then in turn enrich our own lives. We look forward to the day when the entire world can live in peace and harmony, unity, and genuine love for each other. We know that world is probably still a long way off. We pray in the lives we have, we can impact it, we can contribute to it. We can be the best examples of that idea. So we thank you again for this time together. I pray for the meal we'll share after, and the time together we'll have. And we report these things in our name. In the name of Yumil and Vicky Lo, bless and children. Thank you everyone. I'll invite